In recent weeks, I've been exploring something that I personally find fascinating: undesigned coincidences between Paul's letters and the book of Acts. Now, as a quick refresher, an undesigned coincidence can be described as a notable and unexpected connection between two or more accounts or texts that appears unplanned by the individuals providing the accounts. Despite their apparent independence, these elements line up seamlessly, much like puzzle pieces falling into place. Imagine you're reading a passage that leaves you with a question, then, as you turn to another account, you unexpectedly find a casual and subtle explanation for that initial passage. Let's dive into a couple more examples from Acts. In Acts 15:36-40 we read, "After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, 'Let's go back and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaimed the word of the Lord and see how they are.' Now Barnabas wanted to take with them John, called Mark, but Paul thought it best not to take with them one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so that they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord." So, what exactly is the deal with Barnabas being all gung-ho about taking Mark along, even after Mark pulled the disappearing act on Paul and Barnabas back in Pamphylia? Luke leaves us hanging on that one. But fear not, when we flip over to Colossians 4:10, the mystery unfolds. Colossians 4:10 says, "Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you, and Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, concerning whom you've received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him." So Colossians drops a neat tidbit that sheds light on why Paul and Barnabas were at each other's throats. Turns out that Mark and Barnabas were family, cousins to be precise. Now, here's the twist. Paul didn't slip in this cousin connection in Colossians to justify the tiff in Acts. There are no signs of any beef or falling outs involving Mark and Colossians. By the time Paul jotted down that letter, it looks like they patched things up. And Luke, the storyteller in Acts, isn't dropping hints from Colossians either, because he conveniently skips the part about Mark being Barnabas' cousin, which would have been pretty natural to throw in if that were the case. Now, this right here is a classic case of an undesigned coincidence, and it's like a neon sign pointing to Acts being straight from an eyewitness account. In the same part of Colossians, we find out that Aristarchus is hanging out with Paul, and he gives his greetings. We see this connection pop up again in Philemon 23-24, where Aristarchus sends his regards once again. Now, what's interesting is that Colossians is one of those letters that Paul wrote when he was locked up in Rome. Now, flip over to Acts 19:29. Aristarchus is identified as a traveling buddy of the Apostle Paul. It reads, "The whole city of Ephesus was filled with confusion, and having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were Paul's travel companions, they rushed with one accord into the theater." Additionally, in Acts 27:2, we discover Aristarchus journeying with Paul to Rome. It reads, "And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners to a centurion named Julius of the Augustan cohort, and embarking in a ship to Adamantium, about to set sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea, Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, being with us." What catches the eye here is that in the same letter, besides Aristarchus, we get a shout out to Mark and Justus. Interestingly, their trip to Rome isn't detailed in the book of Acts. Now, if someone's just making up details from Colossians for the history of Acts, it makes you wonder why Aristarchus steals the spotlight and not Mark or Justus. Seems a bit random, right? On the flip side, if Acts is informing the writer of Colossians, it's a real head-scratcher why only Aristarchus' journey gets a shout-out. And here's the kicker. If Acts borrowed from Colossians, it would have been way more fitting for Aristarchus to make his entrance in the last chapter of Acts. If Acts were following Colossians' lead, it would have been a no-brainer to mention that Aristarchus was Paul's roadie right until the very end. But nope, Acts keeps it totally low-key, hinting that Aristarchus made the whole Rome trip with Paul. Acts doesn't spill the beans on whether he stayed long in Rome. This confirmation is just way too subtle to be made up. So the bottom line, Luke wrote both Luke and Acts. And if Luke's the meticulous historian with the inside scoop on Paul's life, it definitely increases Luke's credibility big time. Plus, Acts 21, where the author locates himself, it's jam-packed with all the big names, elders, including James and even Philip the deacon. Luke would have had prime opportunities to talk to the heavy hitters in the church, like Peter and the other apostles, and to get the inside scoop straight from the source. And he also traveled together with Mark, where it's possible that maybe he even got an early copy of his gospel and verified its apostolic origins. This evidence is a really big deal. All right, so we're wrapping up with undesigned coincidences between Acts and Paul's letters. I hope this series has been a handy guide for you. Coming up next, we're diving into the Gospels, so keep an eye out. Don't forget to hit the like button, drop a comment, subscribe. You can also support me on Patreon. Thanks so much for watching and stay tuned.